Completing a 200-mile bicycle ride is hard enough, let alone racing them. On today's episode, we'll be covering double-century races from the perspective of a highly accomplished and competitive ultracyclist. Everything from events to training to nutrition to strategy and all the usual awesome ultra talk. I'm your host, Justin Tu. Let's roll. Hey, Ultra family, Justin Tu here, your host of the Ultracycling Show. Thanks for tuning in for another episode with today's special guest, Mark Christopherson. Mark currently resides in Trabuco Canyon, which is in Orange County of California. Mark has completed 40 double centuries in the California Triple Crown Series, and he has also won the stage race back in 2017, where he raced in the Mulholland double century, as well as Oceanside and Terrible 2. He's completed Lotuja on 2 occasions, which is a 200-mile bicycle race from Logan, Utah to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He also rides for Team Simple Green Specialized Rock and Road, and he enjoys competing in mountain bike races, specifically the Over the Hump Series in Southern California, which is one of the largest midweek mountain bike races in the country. Mark, glad to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me in this chat.
Good to see you, Justin.
I'll dive straight into our sprint round of questions, and you can answer in 1 or 2 sentences. It's just a fun series of questions that allows all of us to get to know you in a nutshell. So, Mark, first question. How long have you been riding bicycles?
59 years.
How long have you been an ultracyclist?
Really, I would say only 5 years.
How many bicycles do you own?
6 if you include my unicycle.
What's your favorite bicycle?
My Specialized Roubaix.
Nice. I think we share that in common.
Yeah.
Now, what bicycle computer do you use? Garmin, a Wahoo?
Garmin 520.
Nice. And what's your favorite ride snack?
You know, that I don't really have. I'm pretty versatile. I'll eat about anything.
That's fantastic. What's your favorite ride hydration?
So I do 3 different powders. I'll do Perpetuum, Heed, and Cytomax. Those 3.
Not mixed together, just separately, or?
Well, I do the Perpetuum for the long distance, and then in one bottle I'll add some Heed to it because it has electrolytes, and the other bottle I'll add Cytomax because it has electrolytes, and the Perpetuum does not have the electrolytes. So,
all right, sounds like you got that dialed in. What's your favorite post-ride meal? You ever have a craving for anything?
there again, I'm pretty versatile eating. I eat about anything.
When was your last long ride, and how long was it?
So Saturday I was riding in Utah, and it was 84 miles.
Nice. Do you prefer climbs, descents, rollers, or flats?
So I'll put them in order. Maybe climbs, descents number 2, flats number 3, and rollers are the worst. That'd be number 4.
Yeah, I think a lot of us share that in common. Now I know from riding with you that you're pretty good on the descents. So I'm wondering, what is your max speed going down a hill?
So it just coincidentally, this Saturday, I did 60 miles an hour.
That must have been raising the hairs on
Yeah.
When do you enjoy riding the most? Fall, winter, spring, or summer?
Spring, probably. I like spring.
Time of day that you prefer riding?
Morning.
Now, do you think ultracycling requires more physical or mental training?
I think physical. You got to have both, but physical.
Oh, interesting. Do you have a favorite event?
I think maybe the Solvang double century.
Okay. Autumn or spring?
The spring.
Yeah. That's a nice fast one.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for sharing all those golden nuggets with us, Mark. Let's go into our grand tour of questions section now. More open-ended questions. I have a whole series here. Really, the goal is just to get to know you and your cycling career and ambitions in greater detail. So, first question, is always, how did you even get into ultracycling in the first place? Was there somebody that kind of held your hand into it, inspired you, motivated you, signed you up for something?
A good friend of mine, he had done Lotoja multiple times, and he invited me and another friend. The three of us were going to ride together, and that was back in uh, several years ago, 2012, I think,
Hmm.
and so that was the start of it.
Oh, interesting. So just to remind the viewers that Lotuja is a 200-mile ride from Logan, Utah to Jackson Hole, Wyoming,
Yes,
and that's a 200-mile ride.
yes.
How much elevation gain in that?
It's not a lot. It's 7 or 8 thousand, I think.
So I'm curious, where does the pack usually start splitting up and breaking apart in this event? I know it is much more of a race than the California Triple Crown series of double centuries.
So they have, I don't even know what they call it, the non-competitive and the competitive, where the competitive, you need to have a race license in order to race it.
Oh,
And
is
they'll
that right?
start all the different categories by age and so forth. Usually about 50 or more riders per group. And it's like every 5 minutes, they're sending out a group of 50 riders. So you're only racing against your group.
Mm.
And in fact, you're not allowed to get in and draft with any of the other groups. If you go by them or if they go by you, you can only draft with your group. So you're racing against your group.
How many riders participated in this event? It sounds like it would attract quite a wide variety of racers.
Yeah, I don't know the number. I'm sure at least a couple thousand
Mm.
racers.
So it really sounds like it would be quite a fun event. I'm sure it must have all the usual kinds of rest stops along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not only does it have all the rest stops, but it's required, at least on the competitive side, you can't do it without a support crew. You're required to have a support
Mm.
crew, and some of the stops your support crew can be there, and some of them they can't. Some of them are general stops, and so and on top of that, they have at any light. There's not very many lights, stoplights or anything, but the ones that they are, you have right of way, so you never have to stop at a stoplight that whole time. They have all the
Nice.
intersections controlled, and motorcycles and cars and support. It's
Nice.
really well supported.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a very fun and fast event.
But also refereed as well. So they have referees on motorcycles watching you very closely to make sure you're not committing any violations. So it's
Hmm.
highly controlled.
Oh, so that's very interesting. It sounds like it would be a great stepping stone for racers who are accustomed to the traditional kind of road racing format, and if they wanted to get into double centuries.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've got the distance aspect, but I think a lot of the groups, it'll come down to a sprint at the end.
Hmm.
It'll only be a handful of people left, but it could end up a sprint at the end.
Oh, I see. So when you're participating in this, are you riding to be competitive, or are you just riding to enjoy the ride with a few friends or something?
Well, I've only done it twice, and the first time I did it, I knew nothing about long distance riding, and that was really the start of everything. So, in preparation for Lotoja, I did one of the California Triple Crown events earlier that year. It was the Grand Tour. It
Hmm.
was in June of 2012, and then in September was Lotoja. So we had a kind of a tune-up ride, and my only goal in doing Grand Tour was to finish, and pretty much that was the same for Lotoja, was to finish. So that year it was not the competitive class. And then last year, now that I've got a little more experience, I went into the competitive side of it.
Oh, excellent. Now it's all making sense because you and I have both ridden quite a number of double centuries together through the last 5 years or so. And I can tell now that from the very beginning of your ultra cycling career, you were competing with a racer's mindset because that's how you started with cycling. And the majority of people don't start that way. The majority of ultra riders get into the sport simply to complete certain rides and to challenge themselves. So it's great to be able to meet somebody that has that racing kind of mindset, which is what is common amongst road racers in UCI sanctioned events. So talk a bit about the double century races that you have done over the last several years, especially because I know you have been winning quite a number of them.
So like I said, I did the very first one, the Grand Tour, in 2012, and just that was the only one I did that year. And next year, I don't remember. I didn't do any. And then I read a little bit more, and I saw that I could, if I did 3, then I could be a California Triple Crown winner. So that was my goal. And I didn't. I missed the first one of the year, which is always the Camino Real race. And I think I was sick or something, so I didn't do it. And that was the closest to home, and not too much climbing. And since I couldn't even do that one, I didn't do any that year. So 2 years after my first one, in 2013 and 2014, I did none. But then 2015, finally, I got a good start off on the year, and I was able to do 3. That was my goal for the year. I did 3 and made it. And but not only did I make it, but I was always finishing, top 5 or so. So I said, oh, I can do this. And so then I continued. Each year I kind of did a little bit more. Next year I did 4, and then 5 or 6, and each year it kind of got a little bit more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I do remember the first time meeting you was then in 2015
Right.
at the Camino Real
I
double
remember
century.
it well.
I believe we did a 4-way tie, you, myself, Joel Southern, and Adam Bickett.
Right. And one of the things I remember from that ride, particularly because I had talked with, I don't know if you know Rod Palomino. He had already done a lot of these double centuries, and I met him on some of just the local group rides. And so I started talking to him and he was very helpful. I'd ask him questions on how you do that and so forth. And he would give me a lot of information. So he was kind of a little bit of a mentor there early on. And then on that ride, I had asked him ahead of time, where does everyone stop? Because I was looking at the rest stops, and he said, well, they're going to pass the first one at 30 miles, but there's one at 56 miles, and everyone will stop there. At least the lead group will stop, and you can go to the bathroom there. And so that's what I was counting on, because even at 30, I really had to go. And so, and we had a pace line of, 15 or more people and going full speed. And they went right past that stop at 50. And there's no way I could have go. So I stopped and went to the bathroom and filled up my water bottles. And I was so disappointed in myself, because I thought riding with Rod that I could maybe do a top 10. And now 15 guys are out in front of me already. So I'm done. But after I got my water, I decided to just time trial it until I was pooped out. I figured I maybe could go for 30 minutes or something, just time going as hard as I could by myself. And just as the group, once we got on the freeway, there's a freeway section, so it's straight and you can see a long ways away. And eventually I could see the riders, the group way up ahead. So I just kept time trialing it. And luckily after they exited the freeway at Oceanside, and I was slowly catching up, but I was also running out of gas going that hard the whole time. But I caught him at that light and got back on with him, and then I finished with you at the end. So I was so excited when I got back on the group.
Wow, that is incredible. I can't believe after all these years, I had not realized that you were off the back that whole time. And I know myself and Adam Bickett, especially in that large pace line, we were really gunning it because we were towards the end of our Race Across America training there in 2015. So it's incredible that you were able to close that gap and also finish there in the top spot for that race.
And afterwards, I saw on Strava that section of freeway from Las Pulgas to Oceanside, I got the KOM for that.
Wow, that's incredible. Big congratulations and well-deserved. You mentioned Rod Palomino and how he played somewhat of a mentor role in your ultracycling career. And I have an experience with him. It was several years ago, back in my first Grand Tour triple century. I remember we were towards the end, and the last 50 or so miles down Highway 1, Rod actually ended up catching up to me, and I was able to hop on his wheel, and he was kind enough to pull me and one other person to the finish line. And he was just so strong. I could hardly keep his will. So, what other events have you done over the last several years in the California Triple Crown series of double centuries? And are there any ones in particular that are most memorable to you?
Well, I was real happy in 2017 to be able to do to win the stage race. That was a big accomplishment.
That's
I
right.
didn't really expect to be able to do that. So I am happy with that one.
Now, did you go into that with the intention of riding all three of them, or were you just really taking them one at a time?
I took it one at a time. So that was the first year I'd started, like I said, one and then three events and then four and five.
Hmm.
And but the ones I picked were all the ones that were closest to home and the least amount of climbing. And so I was kind of afraid to do one that had a lot of climbing. But that was my first attempt that year to do the Malibu, the Mulholland rather, the Mulholland, because I knew it had a lot of climbing, and it was the first in the stage race that year, and I came in second on that, uh, which so I had a good time. And the next one was Oceanside, and the person that came in first, our friend Jason Perez, he was not doing Oceanside, so that
Ah,
gave me an opportunity and I won Oceanside. So after two races in Southern California, I was in the lead. And so I knew I had to do the third one that year for the stage race.
nice. And that third one was the Terrible Two, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, arguably one of the harder double centuries in the series, especially in terms of the elevation gain, but also the temperature during that ride. It gets very hot. The ride starts there in Santa Rosa, California, Northern California. So the temperature is typically pretty uncomfortable in the afternoon. How was the day for you riding that?
So before I tell you that story, the second at Oceanside, they had winds unlike they've never had before. They had 50-mile-an-hour winds going up the Montezuma climb,
Oh boy.
and literally, I've seen video where it blew people over, especially people if you had the deeper dish wheels, and luckily
Yeah.
I didn't. And so,
Wow.
and then not only that, but it was 80 or 90 degrees in Borrego, and just as you got over the crest there on Montezuma, it was a freezing rain. And
Oh my
so
goodness.
very few people were able to finish that race. So again, there weren't very many people left in the competition for the
Mhm.
stage race after that. And then Terrible Two, it was the year it was over 100 degrees, and a lot of people were dropping out because of the really high temperatures. And I really suffered through that one to get done.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like it wasn't a cakewalk for you, and you really had to earn that victory. You were faced with a lot of challenges, and therefore it was really an incredible accomplishment.
It was, yeah.
So, congratulations again on that. I know that the Montezuma Pass is quite a challenging one and a very famous one in the Race Across America, what is known as the glass elevator, although you descend it rather than climb it in that event. And from the low desert floor in Borrego Springs all the way to the top, there typically are some microclimate changes between starting from the bottom and as you work your way up. And having to battle 50-mile-per-hour winds, that is always a killer. Pretty cool. Now, we've talked a lot about the accomplishments that you've achieved from the events you've participated in, the stage race that you won. But I'm curious, has there ever been a ride that you have not completed? In other words, you DNF'd in?
That's a great question. Surprisingly, in the 40 that I've done, I never have DNF'd. I came close a couple times. One time I broke a spoke, and the wheel was completely off true. It wouldn't turn at all. And I didn't think I would be able to finish that one, but
Mm.
eventually did finish it. So there's been a couple times where it's been on the edge, but I've always finished them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great to hear. It's probably a rare occurrence amongst ultra cyclists simply because the events are very challenging. And for a lot of them, with the lack of experience, both in pacing and nutrition and training, it's quite common that ultra cyclists, especially if they've ridden a lot of them early on, one of the first, they DNF for whatever reasons, whether it was the weather, the temperature, other environmental factors, or just a lack of experience or pacing or training, or just it wasn't a good day for them. Now, in terms of your future plans, are there any specific rides that you still have on your bucket list or challenges that you'd like to accept and take on? For me, I think the big elephant in the room with a ultra cyclist of your caliber and competitiveness is, are there any solo multi-day events that you'd like to take on? Recently there was the race across Oregon, there's the race across America, the race across the West.
So when I get done with a double century, I think, wow, I really don't want to ride further than this. So I really haven't planned to do anything other. I like the California Triple Crown ones, a double century. That's a good 1 day limit for me. So yeah, I haven't really aspired to do anything longer than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you'll just stay focused on getting those 10 more to get into the Hall of Fame at 50. And then at that point, you'll grow the wings to sign up for a solo. We'll see
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll have
see.
to have you
Yeah.
on the show when you make that big announcement.
Yeah.
So, in terms of training, you're definitely on one end of the spectrum in terms of double centuries. I would say that 90 to 95% of riders are not riding with a certain time in mind. And perhaps the only time that they're thinking about are the cutoff times, which for different events could be anywhere from 17 hours and upward. A lot of riders are simply riding to complete an event, to challenge themselves, and to ride with some friends and enjoy a beautiful course and a day out on the bicycle. So in terms of your week to week training, what does that look like, and how would you rate yourself today in your fitness on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being in excellent shape?
I'm probably an 8 right now.
All right.
This is an unusual year with the COVID-19, so I kind of I'm a person that gets into routines. So in past years, my routine, it's a real standard routine. I usually ride to work twice a week, which is now it's a little shorter than it used to be, but it's 23-mile round trip to work. So that's 2 rides a week. Tuesday mornings, I always do the Tuesday morning World Championships. Starts at 6:30 a.m. and if you're there at 6:31, no one will be there. It's very prompt, and it's a bunch of really great people, and it's it pushes you, get some good speed training in on that. So that's my third ride.
Now, is that organized by a specific team or club?
No, it's a friend of mine, Todd Brown. He and another friend, I think they just started it years ago, and it's just friends. There's nothing official about it. And it's just every Tuesday morning, a group of like-minded riders get out there.
Oh, pretty cool. Now, your commute every day, 23 miles round trip. What's the pace like? Are you doing a time trial all the way there each day?
No, I kind of know, the stoplights is the thing that slows you down, but I kind of have a goal every day to get there in 40 minutes and get home within 45. So I'm always shooting to make it the mark. So I'm pushing pretty hard in between. And the reason I give myself a little more time on the way home is because I'm at a higher elevation at home than I am at work. So it's more uphill on the way home than it is on the way to work.
Wow. So finishing strong every ride there. Now, how about your long rides every week? What does that usually look like? And how do you go from base training to training for the double century season or a specific event?
Yeah. So I talked about the 3 weekday rides that I normally do. And then on Saturday, I do a long ride. And my go-to ride here before COVID-19 was the Canyon Velo ride. A lot of people do that one. There's lots of rides here in Southern California, but that's a convenient one for me. So if I just do the Canyon Velo and I'm not training for a double century, for me, because people hop into the ride and get off the ride at different points, but for me, it's about 83 miles. But when I'm training for a double century, then my routine is I keep my weekday rides the same as always, the same routine. And then my Saturday ride, I push it up to 120 miles. So I'll do the Canyon Vela ride, which gives me that high intensity for the first part of the ride, because once you hit a climb or something, the group's racing. They're going hard and fast, and then after the group gets done and I go my own way, then I just add some endurance miles at the end to get at 120. And if I do that, and I can do that for the routine, now that I've done 40 California Triple Crown, I kind of have my routine. So I need to do that 3 weeks in a row before the double century, and then that's all. That's it.
So for you, about 120 miles is a baseline that you're comfortable with in order to feel competitive for a double century race.
Yeah, it's funny because when you do the 120-mile ride, especially with the high intensity part for part of the first half of the ride, by the time I get home, I'm thinking, boy, this 120 really killed me. I don't know how I could ever do 200, but you're always when you do the race day, you pace yourself a little better probably, and I'm always able to do it then.
Right. Now, for the double centuries that you choose to do through the season, are you selecting them based on which ones are close together on the calendar, so that way you're using your fitness from one event to the next? Or are you just simply selecting your races based on which ones you enjoy the most?
I select ones that are closest to home, the Southern California ones, rather than traveling up to Northern California, just logistics and so forth. But you bring up a good point. So if you've got 2 back-to-back or more, then that saves me having to do those 120-mile training rides, because if I do a double century the week before, that is my training ride. So I kind of like them when they kind of stack up. And that's the way it is. Just by the nature, there's a lot more of them in the springtime. They kind of line up quite a few in the springtime, then they thin out during the summer, and then they have just a few left in the fall. So I like them when they're kind of stacked up a little bit.
Yeah, and once you get into the season, it's pretty easy to keep up your fitness just from one double century to the next. So when it comes to training and even racing, do you track certain metrics like power, heart rate? Are you tracking things like your sleep patterns, anything like that?
That's a great question. Me being an engineer, I like the technical stuff, but strangely enough, when it comes to my bike, the nutrition and the tracking and stuff, I'm real loosey goosey. I really don't give it a lot of attention. Yeah. My current bike, the Roubaix, now it's the first time I've had power on my bike, and I really like that. I like to be able to see it and log it. It's automatically logged on Strava, but I don't really do anything with it.
So you don't really train or race with heart rate zones or power zones in mind. You just kind of know your body and can pace yourself based on how you feel then.
Right. And when I first started doing the road riding, I was wearing a heart monitor, and then I kind of stopped just because it kind of got worn out and didn't work so well. And just recently I bought one again, but I find that I don't put it on that often. I know how it feels, so I just occasionally just kind of check to see where I am.
Yeah. So other than the metrics then, which are just fascinating as an engineer, and I believe we share that in common as well, what else motivates you? What drives you? Because you've clearly been inspired to compete in all of these events as a racer and not just as a rider to complete them, which adds a whole another level of difficulty and complexity.
So I think you pointed out the competition part, I think motivates me, and finishing them, kind of the shared suffering with friends is there's something to that. I did notice this year where a lot of the events got canceled and a lot of them have gone to virtual double centuries. I haven't done any of the virtuals yet, and I think it's probably I missed the competition part. I think I kind of like that part. I think that's a motivator for me. So without that, I haven't been motivated to do these virtual double centuries this year.
Right. I know some other riders, particularly ones that enjoy participating in brevets, self-supported events, definitely not intended to be races. They have been uh, participating a lot in the virtual double centuries. And it does make sense. And I think I could relate as well because it has been difficult to find a group ride to actually do, at least up here in Northern California with the group that I typically ride with. How has the experience been with you down there in Southern California?
So the group rides, when COVID first hit, they pretty much stopped. Certainly the Canyon Velo, which was my go-to, it stopped completely.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was kind of a hanger-on because I remember going just after everything was kind of shutting down, and there were maybe 3 of us that showed up, and then I kind of realized, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this with a group, and so I went for a couple months really not riding with any groups at all. But all the groups I'm aware of, the Canyon Velo and the Tuesday Morning World Championships, was what I like. They're pretty much back to normal, I would say.
Hmm. Okay, so that's very good. So it sounds like things there in Southern California perhaps are loosening up a bit better and faster than they are up here.
Yeah, it's probably why our COVID-19 counts keep going up every week because everyone's kind of on the ride. They're doing them pretty normally now.
Yeah, so I suppose while some people are getting sick from the virus, at least others are able to get fit from riding together.
Yeah, and I don't know any riders yet that have gotten it. So
right. Yeah, that's good. Stay safe out there. So for the double centuries, I'm really curious. What is your strategy for them, and does it change from one event to the next? What is your strategy? How do you prepare for them in the days leading up to an event, during the event, or just before? Do you have any kinds of traditions that you undertake before each ride?
no, I don't have a lot of that. So I just do my normal training rides during the week. I usually don't. I try not to ride on Friday if the event's on Saturday. So I'll have one rest day there on Friday. And I mentioned I like the Solvang Spring, and one of the reasons I think, besides it's pretty scenery and a nice ride, but the format I like, where instead of having a complete open window start time, it's all the faster riders are all start together at the very last start time, 7 or 7:30, whatever that turns out to be. Right. So I like that, where you get 30 riders all starting that are plan on getting done in under 11 hours. And then as you go along, it just starts thinning down, 29, 28, 27. And I'm just trying to hold on and not get thinned out. And I some reason I like that, where, it just gets smaller and smaller until there's just a smaller select group at the end.
Now, do you prefer being able to ride solo at some point off the front? Or, do you like to have at least 1 or 2 or 3 other people with you up until a certain mile number, like 150, 170, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, and it really varies from race to race, depending on how the start format and the format. But that's one of the things I like about Solvang. So you can get a lot of drafting in for when you start with 30 people. So you can, and then it's nice to have some other riders with you, I think. But there's plenty of them where I've soloed, after 50 miles or so, I'm on my own, and that's been okay too. So I like them all.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you bring up an interesting subject in regards to the start times. And I have noticed in recent years that a lot of the events have begun to offer more rolling starts rather than having the mass start, or some of them don't even have one at all. So what would you say, and what are your thoughts about that, in terms of what should event organizers plan for in order to attract racers like yourself? Should there always be a mass start time, especially for people who are looking to ride with other strong riders and to have some competition?
I think that's why I like the Solvang is one of my favorite, is because it provides that opportunity, the way they start it. It does have effectively an open start window, so people that just want to finish, they can start as early as they want, but they kind of do it in groups, and then those that want to be a little more competitive, they have a group start at the very end, and so that kind of gives both options. In the ones where they're completely open and no one's really coordinating, I generally try and find out which of my friends are riding that one, the faster guys and or gals, and whoever that is, and try and time it with them. Get at least a half a dozen of us together to kind of start together and ride together as long as we can. And usually it's the end of the start window, whatever the open window is. Usually we're starting at the very end of that, and so.
All right. Any suggestions that you have for event organizers? Should they always include a later mass start time for those looking for some competition and a timed start?
I think so. And even more specifically, I think actually having time, because a couple of events, they just list finishers and that's it. They don't bother doing the time. So I at least I would like them to time everybody and provide the times at the end.
Now, have you ridden any of those specific events where they don't track time?
Yeah, like I think Southern Inyo, they don't always, they'll just, they don't put the times down.
Right. Now, did you only sign up for that one because you were looking to just enjoy the scenery or ride in with somebody where otherwise you wouldn't have signed up at all because they weren't tracking time?
Yeah, it was in the spring, and it's not all the way up to Northern California, so it's kind of midway. It's not too far away, and so yeah, and it was. I thought it would be an interesting new one to try. So I've done it a couple times, and I like it. Even though they don't provide time, the way the rest stops are set up, you kind of find out where how many people are in front of you. So you find out if you're no one's in front of you. So you kind of know that you're going to win, especially if you start at the latest start window, the latest time, and then no one's in front of you. Then you've won.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of nutrition, you did previously mention heat and perpetuum, but during a ride, are there other things that you enjoy and that specifically you're looking out for at the different rest stops, or things that you're carrying with you?
So yeah, so the powders, yeah, I guess I'm not that particular. As long as we have some electrolytes, and I like it when they have the Hammer products, just because I'm familiar with that, because that's what I use. So if they have those at the tables, then at least I have something I'm familiar with. And then the other food there, some people count their calories and they need to intake so much per hour, and I don't do any of that. Just if I feel hungry when I get to an aid station, I'll grab whatever looks appetizing at that point and stuff it in and go.
All right. Now, do you try to limit your consumption of certain food items until, a certain mile marker, or is it really just how you feel?
Yeah, it's however I feel. I'll just take whatever feels good at the moment. I found out on the very first one I did, that Grand Tour, the very first double I ever did, where they had a big spread at lunch and a chow line and big burritos. And I found out that that's not a good idea to have a big lunch in the middle of a ride. You need to just have a lot less.
Okay. So would you say then that you really just spread out your nutrition throughout the whole race, and even at lunch, although you may have a bit extra, you're really not having a whole lot?
Right. A lot of the rides now, I'll pass the lunch stop up altogether, depending on where it is, where it fits in. But yeah, so I do try and go as long as I can and pass up. I certainly don't stop at every aid station. Pass up the ones that I can and just get essential ones, the least amount as possible.
So when it comes to skipping rest stops, how do you manage that? Before you begin a race, do you already know which mile markers or which rest stops you'll be taking a stop at? Or do you just play that by ear and take it mile by mile?
I'm playing it by ear. I do like to look ahead of time to see the distance on the rest stop so that I can kind of plan it as I go and how I'm feeling. But sometimes they'll have two close together, and I know I won't want to stop at both of those. So, but usually I wouldn't want to stop before 50 miles, and then go that far again if you can. It seems like sometimes you need to have a little shorter distance later on towards the end. You might need to stop a little more frequently.
Right.
But the ones that I've done really well in, maybe some of the best, I've only stopped twice the whole time. So.
Okay. Just for a bathroom break, really.
Yeah, that is a key. That's you bring that up, but that's actually pretty important for me at my age. I found that some people, they call prehydrate and drink quite a bit before they start, so they don't need to carry as much fluid, or so they don't need to fill their water bottles up as soon. But I can't do that. I'll have to stop and go to the bathroom. So I don't drink anything before the ride that morning. I try not to drink anything at all, so I don't have to stop too soon to go to the bathroom.
So what's the longest that you've actually had to hold it in for, in terms of number of miles or amount of time?
I've probably held it 30 or 40 miles from when I started thinking I really need to stop.
Oh, wow. And was that because you were with a group and you didn't want to?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So when it comes to the rest stops, now you race, so you're going fast. So are you going into each rest stop with the mindset that you want to be in and out as quickly as possible? If you're coming in with a few riders, are you willing to stick with them, even if they're taking 5 or 10 minutes longer than you would like?
Probably not 5 or 10 minutes, but I do like to kind of keep a core group together. So I try and, if we have a core group that's working really well together, I don't want to go out before they go. I'd like us all to go together. But if someone's going to be an extra 10 minutes, I probably would not wait that long.
Right. Now, how do you dress for a double century? Typically, we're starting anywhere from 5 to 7 a.m., riding through the whole day, and perhaps it'll take 10, 11 hours. What's your thought process there and your strategy when it comes to the clothing that you wear?
Yeah, so it's okay to start to be a bit cold at the beginning. Sometimes it's really cold, not to carry too much extra clothing, but you got to look at, and nowadays, we can look at the forecast. They're pretty good. You can, see the hour by hour, the temperatures and everything. And so you kind of plan by that. So, arm warmers are great because you can just slide them down when you get a little bit too warm later on, or pull them back up. I've had some rides where I'm several times pulling them down and pushing them up, depending on how warm you are at the moment. And then depending on usually none of them are that cold in California. I have one really compact, small windbreaker that I'll keep in a back pocket if it looks like it could get a bit cold, because that adds quite a bit of extra warmth.
Now, switching gears from competing in races and kind of your strategies, tell me about your support team. As an ultra racer, having to drive off to events that could be far away, having to compete, having to do all that training, balance your life. Who are the people in your life that help kind of cheer you on, whether, it's a loved one, family member, colleagues, friends, people that are, motivating you? Tell me about that in your life.
So for me, I think that's one of the reasons why I do the California Triple Crowns. It's a one-day event. And so my wife, we have a handicapped daughter, which she's home watching. So it's it makes it more difficult for her to come. So she doesn't really come to any of my events. And so I'm pretty much on my own. So I drive to wherever the event is. And if it's a little further away, I like to get a hotel the night before so I can get up early and have a good night of sleep. But I'm usually kind of on my own. So that's one of the reasons I picked this type of event. It's there, you have the foods there at the rest stops, and you can pretty much do it without any support.
How about the day of the event? You said the day before the event, you get a hotel to stay in. Do you just drive home straight after each event, or do you stay in a hotel?
I drive home usually always afterwards.
Okay. Have you ever been super tired where you had to pull over, or were you just always able to make it back?
I've always been able to make it back. I'll bring
Nice.
like a Diet Coke,
Yeah.
a couple in the car just in case, Dr. Pepper. But funny, I've never had to really drink them after the ride. Usually I'm able to drive home okay.
So, how do you balance the rest of your life from your family to work to things around the house? Because the needs of an ultra endurance racer, I mean, you had mentioned that you think it's more physical than it is mental, which means a lot of physical preparation. So, how are you able to accommodate that?
Yeah, that is a challenge. That is a big challenge, trying to fit everything in your life and to get the training miles in that you really need to if you want to be competitive. So maybe that's why I'm able to do it. I started very late in life compared to most other cyclists to doing these long distance one. I have 4 kids. My youngest is in college now, so that I don't need to spend as much time with them. So that gives me a little more flexibility. But you still have
Mm.
work and other things that take up your time. So yeah, I think if I had all the time I needed, I would probably do more training time than I do. You have to balance it with everything else. So
Mm.
I've kind of found my balance right now.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a good routine going. Now, training for you and even racing, is it really just about that competition and intensity versus being able to unwind, kind of being able to disconnect from day to day life? What is it for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a little of both. I like the competition part of it, but I also like the disconnecting part. You don't you're just kind of focused on one thing, getting to the next mile,
Yeah.
and you don't think about I don't think about the other stuff too much while I'm doing that.
Mm. Yeah, I really love that aspect as well. It's a really cool feeling when you're able to focus and disconnect in those ways. But when you're out there, especially racing, what are you thinking? Especially when you're off the front solo and you've got 100 miles to go, maybe. Are you ever thinking about anything specifically, or are you just looking at the road ahead of you?
I'm probably looking at the road ahead of me more.
Okay.
I'm sure I wander about different things, but yeah, I'm just kind of strategizing and see where I'm going to need to stop yet next, and how I'm feeling, and
Mm.
what pace I can maintain.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, what bugs you most, kind of like a pet peeve during a double century, whether it's a rest stop not being set up, not having what you need, traffic lights? What kind of frustrates you the most?
Yeah, I've had a couple of more that the rest stops. You're out ahead of the rest stops, and so they don't have them set up, and that's not so good. Had one where um, there were 3 or 4 rest stops in a row that I was already planning on maybe missing a couple of them, but after a
Nice.
while, I got a little bit desperate when they were all closed.
Yeah, especially when you're competing because you're always in that go, go, go mode, it can be frustrating.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think most people don't really realize about ultracycling, whether it's a non cyclist or just a non ultra cyclist? What would you want to tell people about the sport, the events, kind of everything that we've been talking about and discussing in terms of the elements, the training, the nutrition?
Um, it's there's a real sense of accomplishment when you get done. There are parts of anyone that you really enjoy, and parts of it that you're kind of suffering through to get to the end, and to kind of have the toughness to get through it. Then you feel there's a certain. I think you get. They talk about the endorphin rush. I feel pretty good, even if I'm tired and worn out. I feel pretty good when I'm done.
So, when do you start feeling like you're over the hump and you're on the home stretch? For me, it depends on the route. When I look at the elevation chart and I could see maybe at mile 150, it's a gradual downhill trajectory from there. Then mentally, I'm telling myself that, hey, I'm almost there. Other times, I think maybe mile 170 or mile 180. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think 120 for some reason 120 when I got 120, I think, I can do this. I've got more than half of it behind me. But it varies a lot from event to, sometimes you're feeling good and sometimes you're not feeling as good. It can change a lot from event to event.
That's right. Now, as a person and as an athlete, what would you want people to know about you as an ultra cyclist? What are your greatest strengths, would you say, about yourself? Is it just the constant urge to be competitive? Is it perhaps your endurance, your patience?
Hmm. I think it's a little bit, you talked about physical and mental, and you really need to have both. So to kind of have the stick to itness, the toughness to both mentally and physical to see it to the end and to complete it. That's I think a big part of it.
Right. In terms of role models or mentors or inspirations, earlier you touched on Rod Palomino earlier in your cycling career with double centuries. Are there any other athletes, either in California or anywhere around the world, or people that you train with on a week-to-week basis? Any specific people that you kind of, maybe they're not necessarily an inspiration, but you kind of follow them and you're interested in what they're into, tracking their own journey?
I think mostly I just look at the local riders. There's lots of fast riders around here. So I like the Tuesday morning World Championship is great because it's a lot of the same faces every week, and it is the exact same course every week. And you can always gauge, am I moving up a little bit? Who's the closest to me in that? And you can see if you're moving up or moving back and how you're doing. So I that's kind of fun.
Now we're getting towards the end here, and I have a few more questions. But before I forget, I did want to touch on your recent trip to Utah. Tell me about what you just did. It sounds like it was a bit of fun and a nice escape, especially during this lockdown period.
So that was a lot of fun. It's actually there's a group of guys, and it's the name of the team is TBD Racing. TBD is to be determined, and it's because when they do their training rides on Saturday, they meet up at a certain time, and everyone says, what's the route today? And it's always to be determined when everyone gets there, and maybe they'll ride for a while and decide, keep changing the route. But this group, they do, most of them, a lot of them do the loaded jaw every year. Have been doing it many, many years in a row. So some pretty good ultra cyclists. And they're just a real nice group of guys. So I've been doing some rides with them, and so they had this. They called it the climbing camp, a 3-day climbing camp in Utah, and they planned it, and we all went. There was about 30 of us there, and so it was
a nice sized group.
Yeah, and so we had some dinners together and some great rides planned there. We did 3 rides over some mountain passes and beautiful scenery, and it was just a lot of fun. As much for the camaraderie and the friendship as it was the riding experience. It was both.
Sounds like it was a wonderful experience. Now, was this? I mean, you said it was a training camp, so it wasn't really like a touring kind of relaxing pace. Were you actually going with some kind of structured workout, or was it just a hard effort?
I wouldn't call it a structured workout, but it is a hard effort. Once you get to the climbs, it's kind of everyone going, I think, pretty much as hard as they can to the pace that they can, whatever pace they can hold. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's.
Did you have some good competition out there and kind of satisfied that part of you?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's some really, really fast guys on those climbs, and a lot of, so I'm probably the oldest maybe in the group. So yeah, there's plenty of fast young guys.
Oh, cool. Would you say that training camp helped notch up your fitness a couple points?
Yeah, it definitely did. So I had the TMWC this morning, and I placed better than I probably normally do there. But I think that's the altitude. So you come from the high altitude and come back down to the lower altitude here, and I think you get maybe 3 days of where you're really better than you are normally, but then that kind of goes away pretty quick. But yeah, I felt pretty good this morning at the TMWC.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Maybe you'll have to go out for another ride after this just to enjoy that boost of fitness.
Yeah.
What are your tips for people who want to get started with ultracycling?
Um, the California Triple Crown Series is just a great one because you've got all different levels doing it. You've got the people that are their only goal is to finish, and other people that want to, beat their time from last year and so on. So, they're well supported. It's just a great way to, I think, get into it.
I definitely agree. There's a very big and supportive family, including yourself, who is there to greet and support other riders. So there's other events that are coming up, and a lot of them may end up just remaining virtual. So do you have any inclination to do any of those the remainder of the year?
I probably won't do any of the virtual, so I'm waiting for some actuals to start up. So I would like to get some more in this year if I can, and I am scheduled to do Loaded Jaw, and Loaded Jaw, they're as of today, they're still saying it's a go. So,
Mm.
but the people I talked, a lot of people saying maybe only a 30% chance. We'll
Oh,
see.
okay. Yeah, we'll have to follow up with you about that. It would be interesting to discuss that specific event in more detail because even myself as a younger ultra rider, it would be fun to learn about, the competitive kind of side of ultra endurance riding. Now, the race across Oregon, I believe, has just ended or is in the process of finalizing, and it's a 1,000-kilometer ride or so about 600 miles. Would you consider doing that in the next couple of years, either solo or in a relay team or any of those kinds of longer events?
I would think about it. Although 200 miles right now, I'm pretty worn out at the end of 200, and I tell myself that's as much as I ever want to do. But I might get motivated to do one of these longer ones sometime. On the other end of the spectrum, the two kind of race series that I've been doing the last few years, they're kind of really opposite ends of the spectrums. I do the California Triple Crown double century endurance type ride, and then I do the over the hump mountain bike racing, which is just as opposite as you can be. It's mountain bike instead of road, but it's also about an hour long, and you're just redlining for 1 hour, just as hard as you possibly can go for 1 hour. So it's kind of a sprint, and so it's just the opposite end of the spectrum. But it's a fun. It has a fun vibe to it, and I've enjoyed it and done well there.
It sounds like you're a very well-rounded rider, and kind of gluing all that together is your competitiveness. And so, on that note, would love to do a short sprint round of questions to the finish line here. Just a short list of questions to end on a fun note. So, Mark, when is your next long training ride?
Um, the next event that I've got on the calendar is end of August, but I don't know if I'll make it. So if I do it, then I have to start 3 Saturdays before and start doing long training rides.
And how long will the ride be? About that 80 to 120 miles?
120. So I need to do three rides at 120 3 weeks
Right.
before the
All right. So
event.
three times the charm.
Yeah.
How would you rate yourself in terms of bicycle maintenance scale 1 to 10, 10 being exceptional?
Yeah. 6 or 7.
Oh, okay, okay. What's your dream bicycle, or do you already own it?
You always want more bikes. It'd be nice to have a special bike. Right now the Roubaix is a good one for the California Triple Crown. It's a good comfort kind of endurance cycle one. But I'd like to have a super light, quick one for the Tuesday Morning World Championships, and gravel bikes seem to be a big rage right now, and they have some real nice ones out there. But I don't know if I would ride it if I got one. But you just want more bikes, and I'm due for a new mountain bike, so my next bike purchase will probably be a replacement mountain bike.
Oh, okay, very good. We'll have to have you on the show again for you to introduce that. Any of your bikes have names?
No, I don't have names for them.
In order to spread the community and to keep the Ultra Talk going, who would you like to nominate for a future episode? Someone who you think their story would just be interesting, or somebody that you would like to hear from?
Well, I know Lori Hockland. It'd be good. I don't know if you've had any females yet, but she's really a great ultra cyclist, and she'd be a great one to do.
Yeah, great suggestion. Definitely would love to have a lot of the females on the program as well, because there are a lot of very strong women out there, and some of them super ultra. Yeah.
Yeah, along that same line, Jen Orr would be a great one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. She did the race across the West, I believe.
Yes. And she also does that 24-hour worlds
Okay.
in Borrego.
Right.
I think she's done well there. And yeah,
Does she live there in Southern California?
yeah,
Is that
she
how you
lives
know
in,
her? Oh, okay.
yeah, not Temecula. Anyway, yeah, she's down.
Somewhere
She's
down there.
inland a little ways, but yeah, she's down here.
Cool. All right. Sounds like some good stories. But in any case, Mark, it's been a real pleasure. Nice chatting with you. Thanks for sharing all of those tidbits and all of your race strategies and secrets. I'm sure you'll have a lot more competition. And I think you have a target on your back after this.
It's been great chatting with you, Justin. Thanks.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode with our special guest, Mark Christopherson. Sign up for one of the double centuries and give him a run for his money. I'm sure he'll greatly appreciate that. Until next time, keep spinning ultra.